How do you get studio grade recordings from home nowadays? I'm Victor. I'm here with Cody, who's the owner of Understudy Studios. And Cody, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a musician first, a producer recently, and working on becoming a mix engineer. Um, and it's been a journey and one I look forward to every day.
No, amazing. So I've seen you here at Understudy Studios, which is our neighbor, and you've been developing quite the little recording setup in one of the most unlikely places, honestly.
Thank you.
And I'm being impressed every time with the recent recordings that you've been engineering and producing. You're getting some real studio grade quality. I know you've been building up all your equipment and everything, and you're self-taught. You don't have an audio engineering educational background, but you have a purely experience-based background. And can you speak a little bit about that journey to it and really like utilizing a space that's not a traditional recording studio that could be very equivalent to someone's garage or someone's room, and really transforming it to get these sounds that you've been getting recently in these records, these really full, rich sounds?
Yeah, so particularly the drums is what having a big room is all about, and this room isn't that big. It's yeah, like you said, about the size of anyone's garage, but utilizing acoustics properly and we have very little acoustic treatment right now, and but I want that. I chose not to treat the room. I didn't want to over treat it because you get that extra liveness from
Mm.
the acoustics from the sounds bouncing around, and it just makes the drum sound bigger and more like just larger than life. And that's really what you're looking for in any recording is making something larger than life.
Would you say that the particular materials that the room is made of has been affecting, like, is that took part into why you chose not to go with too much acoustic treatment? Because I feel like a lot of people feel that they have to deaden a room by default to make it really like a studio grade environment.
Yeah, I mean, you have options, is what it comes down to. If you have a medium sized room, like the average bedroom, you got to deaden the entire room. You have no choice. It's just not going to sound good. You need to have the room needs to be big enough because something like the low E of a bass string, that the wave one cycle at whatever the waveform is, that's over 22 feet
Mm-hmm.
long. So that means for that when you play that bass and that waveform travels through the room, it's got to travel 22 feet to complete.
Mm.
Um, and it's just like that's when you're in a cramped room like that, you know that 22 feet turns around and collapses back on itself. That so when it'll travel 10 feet, it can come back. But you're in a room that's 12 feet wide by 12 feet wide, a big square. Um, you're going to get a lot of noise cancellation because as sound waves travel on top of each other, they
Mm-hmm.
cancel each other out, and then you end up with this really garage band sounding mix, recording. So you have to deaden that room.
Yeah.
Um, a and then so when I walked into this room, which is I believe it's about 30 feet by 20 feet, something about it's about that size. 30. I want to say it's like 30 feet by maybe 28 or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
Not 28. No. Yeah, definitely close
Yeah,
to 30
I
by
think
20. I think.
probably a good like 300, 350 square
Yeah, it's
foot
more.
room.
It's definitely more rectangular than
Yeah.
square, but um, right off the bat, I know I need to set up my drums not in the center of the room, but at furthest to the longest
Yeah.
side,
And why is that?
so that just so everything can have room to travel,
Mm.
and then you can just get the biggest variety of sounds that way. Um,
Yeah.
you're not going to be all the mute sound won't collapse in as on itself. Got to give the room, you got to give the space for the sound to travel.
Yeah, because and it also offsets your reflections because if you're dead center in the room, your reflections are all meeting at the sound source, which
Absolutely.
actually muddens up a lot of your mixing, which is so putting an offset center helps you with in that case on top of what you were saying also.
Absolutely.
And so, and another thing I noticed with this room, like you said, you're not really, you haven't really gone too far as acoustically treating it. Even though I've seen you go and you're able to make your own baffles and out of affordable materials and this and that, and really make things work in that sense. But also, I noticed that you've also gone with certain mic brands that aren't necessarily like what people think as the studio echelon, but like, for example, those warm audio mics, you know,
Yeah.
those, and you found ways to really treat those mics to get these great sounds and using specific miking techniques that you've just gone out, learned, researched. Can you just elaborate on that? Talk a little bit about that on how you came across like using, elevating these, I would say, more mid-tier, semi-professional mics and leveraging also the techniques that you've put into research and stuff.
Yeah, sure. So Warm Audio is a fantastic brand. I mean, just making really, really great products for at a budget. Um, some of their condensers I'm not a huge fan of, but I love their 414 copy. That thing's unbelievable. It's the uh, the WA14. It's a copy of a AKG
Yeah, the C14.
C4.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
love
So
that mic.
amazing mic.
Yeah.
And but the warm audio clone of that is whether it sounds like a real 414 or not
Debatable.
doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
What matters is that mic sounds incredible.
I think
Um,
that's what should matter to most people, you know?
but it doesn't. People see warm audio and they like turn away from it like, oh, this is a gimmick, and it's not a gimmick. They're quality products,
Yeah.
and depending on how you use them, that's what's going to get you a result. I
Yeah.
also use warm audio mic pre's. I have their Neve 73 mic pre copy and their API 312 copy.
Nice. It's like that old saying that you probably most of us have heard, especially if you're trying to get into a technical field, is that it's not about the tool as is about how you use the tool and
Absolutely.
the person operating it and your knowledge in implementing the tool. Because any tool, like you can use even, there's been records, and we both know this, that have done amazing sounds just using mostly 57s,
Sure.
across the board. And that's, your run of the mill $97 mic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyone listened to Red Hot Chili Peppers, I think it was Blood Sugar Sex Magic was all 57s
57s
on
and
the drum
insane,
kit. And
but their engineer though is like, that's where it comes into play.
oh
But,
yeah.
and people will argue though, like on the Red Hot Chili Peppers though, they're still running through like these boards and these preamps and stuff
That's
like
it.
that.
Honestly, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Is you can use the 57 for everything. You can get you can make a great sound even if you only have an interface. You don't even have a good mic pre's.
Yeah.
Mic pre's are, in my opinion, maybe more important than the microphone.
Yeah.
Just because it's like it makes everything sound more alive, and to get that, like to have that one extra step of processing, it just it gives it depth and character. Now, if you don't have that, you can get a cheap plugin. Waves make some great stuff for $30. Most of their
Yeah.
plugins, and it'll just impart that little bit of character. So anybody who's just like wants to record, and you have a room, put your mattress, stand it up. If you don't have a budget and you're just trying to get by with as little as possible,
Yeah.
you can go ahead and put the 57s on everything. I mean, they're $100 a piece
Yeah.
on a a 5-piece kit. Like
There you go.
that's $500 before overheads.
Also,
So
packing blankets actually do a pretty good job if you start to
oh
layer them on
yeah,
everything.
Yeah, packing blankets on all the walls if you have to, sheets, anything with a little thickness. The thicker it is, the more sound absorption you're going to
Yeah.
get. It's common sense, but
Also, another thing, I remember this, learning this a while back, but a big thing when it comes to sound absorption is that if you have a layer, you can also put a little space behind that layer before the next layer. Because
yes.
what's happening is with sound frequencies, they'll hit that first soft layer, like the packing blankets, the mattress, whatever it is. They'll filter out so much of the sound. Some will still get through it, and that usually is what bounces back. But if there's a space, now you get those higher
You get
frequencies bouncing in the space, getting deadened even more before they
right.
hit the next
Well,
layer.
you get a double layer. You can use one layer
Yeah. Get double
to
layer.
filter it twice. Is
Yes.
what's happening because the sound travels through it, filters once, comes back, filters again, and ideally you just want it to filter out enough that when it comes back, the microphone isn't canceling out the
Yeah.
sound.
So now one question I want to pivot to, because I think, as we're talking about this, and we're talking a little bit about the room, the materials, the mic choices and stuff, but I think what it really is coming down to that really helps people get the sounds like you're getting right now, in the room that you have, with the equipment that you have, is that you've put yourself through this process of gaining experience, but just building up your knowledge with every experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've known you for years. We've played together and everything, and so I'm just amazed by like how far you've come in your knowledge and this space. And well, so my question is, I really want you to see if you could elaborate a little bit on that kind of process of like how are you learning and stepping up as you work on things, as you're experiencing things? Is it more of a, oh, I want to try this. How do I do this? Let me look it up. Or is it more of a trial and error type of basis? Or are you going in with a specific idea, trying to pre plan it all before even going into it and then executing?
Yeah, you have a lot of things there. We're gonna try and break them all
Yeah.
down. All right. I thought that question was gonna end like 2 questions ago,
It's more
but
about the process. At the end of the day, it's like, how do you get the knowledge that you've gotten?
sure. So, uh, really, it all comes down to is problem solving. That to me is what sound recording and sound mixing is all about, is problem solving. If you could just take a microphone, plug it into a computer, and hit the record button, there'd be nothing to solve, right? But it's not that simple. It is that simple if that's all you want and you're happy with that result. There's no such thing as a bad sound, but because it's so subjective. Subjective or objective?
So objective.
So objective, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So all of it's so objective, and if you're happy with just the sound coming from a microphone into a DAW, then that's terrific. So for me, it was, because I was never happy with just putting a microphone into a DAW. So I was never happy with the sound of a microphone going into just a DAW. So I would often just take the. To me, it was like, how do I make that sound better? Because
Okay.
this doesn't sound like my favorite records.
Yeah.
This sounds like the room I'm in right now. So that's the first problem was, okay, how do I make this room not sound like the room I'm in?
Yeah.
That's where you hit your first problem.
Would you say a good first step is like thinking like I want it to sound like this record, so let me dive into how they got those sounds, and don't focus so much on the equipment they use, but more on how they use that equipment, like the type of processing they did and stuff like that.
I want to say yes and no.
Okay,
So
elaborate on that.
the first step is, if you're in a band or you're a musician or whatever, and you're into recording and you want to do it yourself, the first step is whatever's you want to come out of the record, you need to first capture that. So there's no point in expensive microphones and preamps when what you're recording doesn't sound great. If you're not getting a great sound out of your drum set, then you're not getting then you're not going to end up with a great sound on the back end.
Yeah.
Does
No, it makes sense.
that make sense? Yeah. So you know, your the source is the first that part, and you need to make that sound good. And once that's sounding good, then you can put a microphone on, and that's when you start experimenting with different microphones, different microphone techniques.
No, and that's a great lead-in because honestly, that's what I was just thinking about was the importance of experimentation when it comes to that, especially when you're in your own environment and you're dealing with your own things. It's important to experiment with what you got. And I just remember the example of just the other night, you were taking some time to really test out drum sounds
Oh,
in your
sure.
room and the different things you can do. And you even had the idea of experimenting by putting one of your mics in a kind of a trash can, essentially, in the
Literally,
middle of the room.
literally a
Literally,
trash can.
literally a trash can.
Yeah.
But you got this really unique room tone that added this, I would say, almost like a plate verb to the mix of the drums. Is what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it adds a lot of punch. It gives
Yeah.
it the record just like this, just this really wonderful punch in the mid range.
Yeah.
It was I was so part of learning is watching, going on YouTube and learn and just watching a ton of videos while,
Yeah.
and I'm horrible. I do it while I'm driving because I'm not actually watching the video.
Yeah. You're listening. You're
I pay
listening.
for the
Safe driving,
premium and
people.
I can, yeah. So I can shut my screen off and listen. Anyway,
Yeah. You,
but there's wonderful guys like Chad Blake, and something he would do that's where I got this from is you just take a metal trash can and stick a microphone in it next to place it next to the drum set, and just you'll get that sound, and it's easy to obtain. You'll get it quick. You ain't got to mess around too much.
yeah.
So I highly recommend that technique if you just looking for something different. It's not suitable for every style of music, but it's suitable for whatever you want to try it on.
Yeah.
And if you're happy with it, then that's what matters.
Well, that's the great thing. It's like experimenting is how you like got a lot of these unique sounds too, and it really comes together in the mix. You know, it's like
Oh
once
yeah.
it's blending. And you said something last night to me that stood out to me was when we were mixing. You were showing me some of the individual tracks when you were
Right.
showing me the mix, and you even pointed out to the fact that like sometimes like the tracks they don't sound so great when you solo them when they're already mixed into the mix because they're made to sound good for the mix,
Sure.
not to sound good independently. And I think with
Absolutely.
a young engineer, a young someone who's getting into recording, the mistake is commonly that they go in and they start to make each individual track sound best independently,
Yeah.
and then they find that they're having trouble when they're trying to now adjust for the mix, and then they re-solo and it's like, oh, but now I lost this, and
Yeah.
like let me get it back, and then here in the mix and it's like, and then they're fighting between the two sounds,
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
I've ruined many mixes that way. Going in solo and just trying to make something sound good, but mixing doesn't work like that. It's all about the back end. So a technique I've been mixing with, I was inspired by Andrew Sheps, and he just uses a ton of parallel compression and a ton of compression on his master bus. So just as everything's not a ton of compression, but just a lot of compressors,
Yeah, yeah,
and
or fine-tune compressors down a chain.
and then
Yeah.
what happens is you just turn all these compression on, all the parallel compression on, you turn the master bus compression on, and you just hit play. After doing a rough mix on the for levels,
Yeah.
to get your levels, and then just turn everything on and hit play, and the mix will become that much closer to being finished, because it's just like, wow, this sounds good. Now I just got to fix my little problems. So you're kind of working backwards than what's intuitive. And then I say, okay, well, this sounds good, but let me go work on these drums, and I'll solo all the drums and just give myself that starting point. But I'm not gonna just listen to just a kick drum. When I'm listening back to a mix, I already did my fine leveling. Um, I want to hear all the drums playing together. Maybe I'll turn off a room mic, just to because that's kind of, to me, is almost like a reverb. So I can
Yeah.
bring that down, or I can bring it up. I also use the room mic just to add a little length to the kick and the snare. So, but when I'm just trying to problem solve. Sometimes having the room mic off helps, and then I'll bring it back later.
Yeah, it's more about listening to the group and then taking parts out of it versus listening to the parts and trying to bring in the group and seeing how it mixes. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I think just to wrap it up, I kind of want to read some of my key takeaways from what we were just talking about when it comes to, using what you got and using your own space for recordings. And it's like, from what you said, I mean, the biggest things that stood out to me is really understanding your room and its limitations, and then using materials that really can help either deaden it if you're in a smaller room or maybe really leaning into the big space that you have. And not worrying so much about the specific microphones and stuff like that, but being more okay to use um, what you can get, but really learning how to work with them and how to get sounds. Because, like we discussed, there's been big records that use 57s.
Sure.
And there's also semi-professional mics you can get, like Warm Audio and stuff, which are only a few $100s versus like the $1,000 microphones that most people are more aware of.
Right.
And really just not being afraid to educate yourself and experiment with what you have.
Experiment, and pay attention. If you're on YouTube, which all of us are, constantly probably, and you're watching a live band or you're watching a band in a small desk studio or whatever the
Tiny
heck
desk,
the
I think
program,
it's
tiny desk. Yeah, I was trying not to get sued by BBC or whoever does it.
NPR.
All right, same thing. Yeah. So um, the point is, if you're watching a video and you say, "Wow, that drum set sounds great," look at the video, and if you don't know what it is, you ask somebody. There's so many resources online where you can just copy, take a screenshot, post it in a group, and say, "Hey, what mic is this? What mic is on that floor tom? What mic's on that kick?" Because you can at least get that piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't afford the mic, you can find something similar.
Find
You know,
alternatives.
there's
Yeah.
plenty of alternatives. There's plenty of cheap stuff out there. Um, I mean, as far as drums go, like you can get a great sound with just overheads. If that's all you can afford, there's records that have been done that way.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite drum sounds was what is it? Rehab by um, Amy Winehouse. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
that was literally one microphone. It was just a Shure Super 55, and that was the whole kit, and it sounded great. It's just mostly a kick and snare groove, but it'll
Yeah.
do the job. Hello, and so that comes down to just experimenting,
Yeah.
getting the sound,
Yeah.
then treating it. I think that they probably put some samples under it, but the point is that you can get something cool.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's what it's all
exactly.
about. It's
Yeah.
about experimenting, getting something cool.
Don't overthink it. Just dive right into it. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all we have. So Cody, people can find you if they want to look into you at Understudy Studio, and is that the handle for your page?
That's for the Instagram, yeah.
For the
Understudy Studio, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And then
haven't
if
been on
people
it
want to
yet.
follow you personally, on Instagram.
Cody Wyoming, Koudi, Wyoming like the state.
Got
So,
it. Easy
you'll
to
find me.
remember. Cody with a K, Wyoming like the state.
And if you want to make a record or you want me to mix something, I don't know if it'll come out good, but I'll at least try.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure having you on Vision Maker Podcast,
Thank you,
and
Victor.
we'll talk to you again soon.